Sir David Martin Foundation helps young people in crisis. Through philanthropy, we enable best practice models of treatment for youth drug and alcohol addiction. Our vision of safety, hope and opportunity for all vulnerable young Australians has empowered many of them to independence. 92% of those who complete one of our funded programs engage in education and employment. Over 3,000 young people's lives have been saved with 0 suicide attempts. The Foundation is the major philanthropic partner of Mission Australia and is the primary funder of Triple Care Farm, a unique holistic treatment centre which each year gives over 200 young Australians a safe place to get well and to seek new opportunities. Many suffer underlying trauma and mental health issues.
I remember a doctor telling my mum that she should quit her job as I would require full-time care for the rest of my short-lived life and I would never gain employment or live independently.
But treatment works and it empowers these young people to pursue a healthy, productive life.
In 2019, I stood up in front of my mum who had tears in her eyes. I received my degree in paramedicine. Yep, that's right, a bit of paper meant I was smarter than a doctor who gave up hope.
Participation in the programs keeps them out of hospital, out of jail, and it keeps them alive.
Without the foundation, I would be standing here at Millie's eulogy instead of graduation.
I just want to say thank you for believing in my son. He's restored trust in me.
It's changed my outlook on everything. There's hope, there's a future, there's a light.
Through drought and flood, fire and storm, you've made it.
Over 30 years, the Sir David Martin Foundation has raised over $65 million. A recent study showed that every dollar donated by our supporters creates $3 worth of social value. We rely on the generosity of the community to help these often forgotten, neglected and misunderstood young people.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. I'm delighted to have you joining us for our Understanding Youth Addiction event here this afternoon. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet. We're all in different places in this new virtual world. I'm on the land of the Camaragal people and they are of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future. In particular, as General Manager of Sir David Martin Foundation, I'd like to acknowledge the young people, for they are their future leaders. So welcome everybody, welcome to our Board of Governors, to our wonderful donors, and of course to our partners, Mission Australia. So we started the idea of having this event a long time ago in pre-COVID land. And of course now in this virtual world, we've been delighted that this has allowed us to reach a lot more people. And so thank you to all of the educators, to the healthcare providers, community service providers, to the grandparents, the parents, brothers and sisters and young people who are all concerned about this really important social issue. So thank you for joining us today. A little bit of housekeeping. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or it might be at the top of your screen. We would love to have your questions. I know some of you have sent in some in advance, but we'd love to have them. So do please pop your questions in during the next hour. I'd also just like to acknowledge that the subject matter we're discussing today may be upsetting to a lot of people. And you don't need to feel alone in that. We're all here for that discussion. But if you do feel in immediate distress, please do call Lifeline. It is there for that urgency and you shouldn't feel alone. And the number is 13 11 14. It will be displayed at the end of the event on the screen as well. So I won't introduce the wonderful panel that we have here because we're delighted to have the wonderful Sophie Scott from ABC's medical reporter, joining us this afternoon to moderate. Thank you so much, Sophie. And I know it's been a very busy year for any medical journalist, so we really appreciate you taking the time to volunteer and help us here today. So I'll pass over to you, Sophie. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Helen, and thank you for asking me to moderate this event. I know firsthand about Triple Care Farm and how helpful it can be to help young people. We had someone in our own family who was having some mental health and addiction issues, and we really struggled to find anywhere in New South Wales that could help to deal with both those sides of the coin, both the drug and alcohol and the mental health side of things. And Triple Care Farm was the only thing that really made a difference, and was the only place that was able to help put him back on a much better path. And so we're very grateful for the work that they did to help our family member. And he says that the counselling and the help that he got there, he still maintains that that's the best he's ever had. Which is a testament to the great people involved with this organisation. For anyone involved with addiction, it's not an easy path. There can be ups and downs in anyone's recovery journey, but as a family, we're very thankful to Triple Care Farm for the help that they gave our family and so many other families, as you saw in that video. And getting the right help early on can really make such a difference in the lives of young people, and that's something we'll be talking about in this discussion. We'll hear more about the important work that Triple Care Farm does and the unique challenges with tackling youth addiction. So if you're on social media, which I'm sure all the young people watching are, and even some of the older ones as well, if you're on Twitter or Instagram, if you can, it's the David Martin Foundation, and mine is at Sophie Scott and #2. So we'd love you to be part of the conversation. Tweet out photos or put photos on Instagram and your comments, and then we'll get this discussion out to a wider audience. And the hashtags are Understanding Youth Addiction and Youth Recovery. So I'll introduce our panel, and then we're going to speak to our special guest. But our panel, first up, Gabriella Holmes is the Area Manager of Mission Australia's Triple Care Farm. She's a registered psychologist with 20 years experience, and she's been at Triple Care Farm since 2000. Professor Patrick McGorry AO is the Executive Director of Origin, a Professor of Youth Mental Health at the University of Melbourne, and a Founding Director of the National Youth Mental Health Foundation, Headspace. And he is a world-leading researcher in the area of early psychosis and youth mental health. And Dr. Suzie Hudson is the Clinical Director of the Network of Alcohol and Other Drug Agencies. She's an accredited mental health social worker with the Australian Association of Social Workers, and has many years' experience in substance misuse, mental health, research and evaluation. So please give them all a big virtual round of applause. Welcome and thank you for your time. But also, first of all, welcome to our very special guest, Elli. She's an incredible young woman. As a 20-year-old, she was having some difficulties with addiction and mental health, but she managed to turn her life around, as you'll hear, and find her talents as an artist and get her life back on track. So let's hear from Elli. If you want to unmute yourself, Elli, so the audience can hear you, that would be great. Just take us through what was some welcome, and just take us through what were some of the struggles that led you to be at Triple Care Farm.
Yeah, good question. So I guess the main struggle was drug and alcohol addiction, and that sort of just led to a lot of anxiety and psychosis and suicide ideation. But yeah, I'm thankful to Jarrah House as well. So they transferred me to Triple Care Farm, and the struggle of leading up to going there was really scary, because I hadn't heard about any rehab facilities, living in the bush. But yeah, I'm grateful.
So it sounds like it was a big step to go there, but how did being at Triple Care Farm really help you?
I guess being in that environment where, there's a lot of people there for the same reasons that I was, and the counselling program and, of course, the art, really find my purpose and stay inspired. yeah, I think I liked the practical sort of side of being there. So a lot of the, the learning, educational aspect of it, and also the, the art and.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about the art. What did that the art therapy do for you? How did it add to your life in a way that you maybe hadn't had before, in terms of how you could use art in a way? I've seen some of your artworks and they're absolutely amazing. So tell us about that and how Triple Care Farm helped bring that out in you.
Yeah, I guess prior to Triple Care Farm, I didn't do anything that was, good for me. So go there, and I remember my first art therapy session, and just, I was just in that zone of painting, and it was just amazing. So I guess once I got started, I think my art therapist seen some potential there, and yeah, I just loved it. Like it was really fun, and it was nice to have a break from my thoughts and
have an outlet. It sounds like it was a great outlet for you, an expressive way to get things out as well. So one thing, when we spoke, you were talking to me about the aftercare program. So can you just tell us a little bit about that, and what difference did it make to have that ongoing support once you actually left the farm itself?
I guess unlike any other rehab that I've heard about, Triple Care Farm has a very, they emphasize the aftercare program, and I think that's really important, because leaving Triple Care Farm is incredibly scary, and being appointed to an aftercare worker that you can build a rapport with was really helpful, and she helped me with like so many things, practical things like going to appointments and attending my first speech, and all the little things, they add up. And I'm very grateful to Linda, my aftercare worker, and also the time that I was in aftercare. I think doing it for about 6 months, and that gave me enough preparation for the next transition. So yeah, I guess I'm I'm very grateful.
And so how are you going now? Tell us what you're up to now. You said you're in a study zone. You're in the study zone at the moment.
Yeah, so I went from my art to deciding to explore the legal world, and yeah, so I am doing my tertiary preparation at the moment, which is a HSC equivalent. It still gives me goosebumps, because I never thought I would be able to do anything like this. Looking like talking to people was scary before, and so I want to be a forensic scientist, and depending on my ATAR rank, I might be doing a combined degree in forensic science and law, which I'm very excited about. And it's going to be a lot of study, but it's exciting.
That's great. That's just some remarkable achievement. You should be very proud of how far you've come. And so what would you say to people who might be watching this, or who might be struggling themselves, or have a loved one who's struggling with some of the issues that you were having? What would you say to them about the help that Triple Care Farm gave you in the past?
I guess I would say hang in there, because it gets so much better. And it's worth it every day that you conquer without self-medicating, is a huge achievement. And I guess just, you know, just keep trying, you know, and hang in there, because, you know, there's a gold pot at the end of the rainbow.
It sounds like with the help and support that you got, you've been able to make an amazing difference to your life and turn things around. And now you're studying and doing so well and being able to talk to us. And everyone really appreciates you sharing your story, because that's what it's all about. It's about seeing young people like you being able to, you know, turn things around and do so well. And you're really a great example of what Triple Care Farm can do. So thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your story today, and we really appreciate it. Everyone give Elli a big wave and say thanks, Elli. All right, what a great example of the great work Triple Care Farm can do. Absolutely fantastic. So we might introduce. I've introduced the panel. We might go straight into it. I might just get the panel to unmute themselves so we can hear from them, and I might just start with Gabriella. We saw a success story like Elli, but what are some of the other success stories of young people that you've seen that have stayed with you since you've been at Triple Care Farm?
Afternoon, Sophie. Thank you so much. As Elli was talking about her story, I am just blown away by how brave she is. And I think every young person that comes and asks for help are so remarkably brave to say, I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore. Can you help me? Is such a massive step to take. I've had the great pleasure of being here for 20 years now. So there's a number of young people that stand out for me. I remember there was one young man, he was a single dad, and he really wanted to make changes for himself. And Triple Care Farm, for those that have seen it or can imagine it, we are at the top of Jamberoo Mountain. And this particular day, the young person's lift had fallen through, and so he started walking. So wow. The bottom of Jamberoo Mountain to get to the top. He was so determined to make change and to get here. Thankfully, he rang us and we were able to pick him up. But he was so determined to make change that nothing was going to stop him. And when he arrived, he really got stuck into the program. He completed his Cert 2. He got some qualifications in his forklift licence. He really worked on himself in that counselling program, and he was able to step out of the program and take care back up of his kids. And I love, he sends me Christmas photos of him with his little ones and what he's doing. He was able to gain some employment as a forklift driver. So his determination has been really rewarded in the joy that he has with his children. There was another young lady who participated in the program, would be at least 10 years ago now, but she rang to let me know that she had been well, she had been happy, she had been married for 5 years, and she was now the manager of a Commonwealth Bank. And she was just overwhelmed. She had come into the program, similar things to what Elli had talked about, feeling like there was no hope, feeling like she was worthless. She had experienced substance use over a long period of time. She experienced significant trauma, and she was supported to be able to overcome those. And it's just wonderful to hear that story of joy that we get to see at the end of that really hard work.
And that sounds great. Before I move on to the other panelists, I just wanted to ask you, Gabriella, about why is Triple Care Farm so unique in its approach to helping young people?
Yeah, fantastic question. Thanks, Sophie. So I think the thing that makes Triple Care Farm so special for young people and so brings kind of some unique things to them is the holistic treatment. So we look at supporting young people 16 to 24 that present with some pretty challenging issues. We don't say, can't support people with mental health issues. It has to be this particular area. We look at what's happening for the young person and being able to support that whole young person. We provide care that engages both counselling, education, that provides recreation. So we provide art therapy and that was one of the things that really connected for Elli. But we also have a music program. We have lots of really practical elements that young people tend to engage with really well, and it can be tailored. So not everybody has to do art therapy, because that doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody has to do the woodwork program. It's about making sure we understand what's happening for that young person and building a program around them, not making them fit to the program. The other element that is really key, Elli also mentioned this, was the aftercare program. So the change is possible because the young person's able to come here and participate in that program, but it's sustained long term because we're able to provide that community support for young people, and that's really critical.
Oh, fantastic. And we'll come back to you to hear a bit more, but I just thought I'd move on to Suzie now, just to talk about young people and addiction. How do we avoid judgment when young people are having struggles like Elli was having, when they're affected? How do we remove, judging them for what they're going through?
Thanks, Sophie, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think that's a huge question, and one of the key things we know is that the stigma and discrimination that's associated with substance use in particular actually keeps young people, it keeps families, it keeps people away from reaching out for help. And so when we use certain language, that, even the word addiction, unfortunately, has a lot of connotations for people. I mean, we understand that for the community it means something, but certainly what we do know also is it brings to mind a lot of negative imagery, and so already in our society we have a huge build-up of negative thoughts and feelings about people who use alcohol and other drugs. And yet we know that the majority of the population have at least tried a substance in the past. And so I suppose what that tells us is, like with other health conditions, we need to get much better at talking about it. We need to tell the community that, drug and alcohol use is common in our society, and that for not everybody has negative experiences, but for those that do, and so when they get to a situation in which there is dependence, what we want to be able to do is have a community in which people can reach out for that help, so that we communicate to them that yes, people use alcohol and other drugs, sometimes it becomes a problem, and you know what, there is treatment available and it's effective. But the other part of that can be, and I'm hearing these wonderful experiences from Elli and Gabriella talking about triple care, what we also know is that the system is grossly underfunded. And what that means is that sometimes when people do build up that courage and get over a lot of that stigma, they frequently reach out and perhaps, there are waiting lists, etc. But getting back to your original question, I think we as a community need to mature a little bit around alcohol and drug use. We need to start talking honestly and openly and starting to step back from the judgment, because all of us, I believe, have possibly been impacted, possibly negatively, from drug and alcohol use. And so the most important thing we need families and support people of young people who may be using alcohol and drugs to know is that they're not alone. And that, go ahead.
That's such an important message for the audience to hear as well, particularly if there are family members watching now. So that's great. So we'll come back to some of that in a second. I'll just bring Pat in at this point. Pat, you're not muted. That's good. So welcome. We hear a lot about mental health and addiction, but I'm interested to get your perspective on how addiction manifests differently for young people. What do you see when you're given, your expertise is in dealing with young people and the struggles that they have? What do you see that you see in young people that you might not necessarily see in older people?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. And I just want to say, I think I might have met Gabriella a few years ago, because there was a great event at Parliament House in New South Wales, which was showcasing Triple Care Farm, actually. And I got to go to that, and I got to see what an amazing model it actually is. And I said at the time, I thought, wish we had 100 of these models around Australia, because there's so much need for it. And it's such a beautiful model, and great to hear those stories from Elli in particular. And so I think that the thing that Gabrielle mentioned was holistic, and what I loved about it was it brought all of the sort of the clinical expertise alongside all of the the therapeutic things and the kind of health promoting pathways out of addiction that Elli highlighted, like art and other sort of more practical things and ways forward, and the hope that Elli sort of conveyed to everybody was fabulous. And I also can speak personally because in my family, you know, I had a number of siblings, and 2 of them had major addiction. And you know, my brother didn't make it, basically. He died at age 37 after many years of really getting worse and worse with alcoholism, basically. And if a triple care farm had been around, maybe he would have survived. And my sister, on the other hand, managed to come out of this after a number of years and hasn't had a drink for 35 years and is perfectly well. So I can see the 2 trajectories very clearly in my own family. So, and I think so many more people could be saved in that way if there were proper services, and which there really aren't. You know, I think Suzie was pointing out the underfunding of this area. It's just disgraceful. We complain about it in mental health, but it's even worse in addictions. And the stigma's worse in addiction, like you were alluding to, because there's so much judgment. It's seen as a moral failing rather than as a health problem or an illness. And so I think the solution is what we try to do at Headspace, where we and youth mental health, where we try to build in the 4 pillars of care, which are physical health, mental health, you know, addiction or alcohol and drugs, and then the vocational pathways. Those are the 4 essential elements. And it's pretty simple, really. If you can, there are probably some other things too we'd like to see in the mix, like, you know, health arts and things like that that were mentioned as well, and and sort of more flexible, sort of getting rid of some of the boundary sort of hang-ups that mental health professionals have actually got in these areas. So what we see is probably 2 groups, you know, because I've learned a lot in the last 10 or 15 years because I got much closer to the primary care end of things. I had been in specialist mental health care before that, but seeing all these young people coming in very big numbers into Headspaces. And what you see is sort of 2 groups. One is the group of kids, it's about a third of them, I think, who have been through pretty, you know, a real ordeal in life, really, until they get to sort of early teens. And they might have had, you know, if there wasn't neglect or trauma, that there certainly was lots of attachment problems for them, you know, with out-of-home care and foster care and stuff like that. And those kids were definitely on the way to triple care farm, many of those kids, because they would develop a self-medication sort of approach to their distress and their emotional pain. And it was a readily available coping mechanism. And so they ended up with just not just mental health problems, but also, you know, drug and alcohol problems as well. And also quite often, you know, offending behavior and so all the whole mix thrown in. So they're really on a road to homelessness and probably premature death. And if you didn't have structures like Triple Care Farm as a backup system for those kids, then you're really struggling. But I was also surprised how responsive to care and attachment those kids actually were, even though they might have been struggling. Sorry, the dog's barking now.
Thankfully, it's not mine. I was just thinking, oh, that doesn't sound like my dog.
yeah. This is the problem with working from home, isn't it? But so that was one group, and I got a lot more optimistic about that group too, actually. And there's stories like Elli, you know, sort of fit into that too, probably as well. I don't know her background, but and then there's the other group of sort of like kids that have had a fairly positive or even a loving environment who have developed mental health problems despite all that in early adolescence, and we see them too. And they're a little bit harder. They might self-medicate too, but the problem is they don't often see the drug and alcohol use as a problem because it hasn't become a problem really yet. But they're very much at risk because of their anxiety, depression, and other things. And if they do actually use it as a coping mechanism, they can get into trouble with the drugs and alcohol as well as a secondary thing. And Jill Beatty at Origin is doing research and interventions into that group. And she's a drug and alcohol researcher who is Australian, but she trained in New York and she's come back to work with us. So we're trying to get on the front foot, a bit like what Suzie was saying, try to intervene early, try to, you know, basically prevent people ending up in really, really severe sort of situations so that but we need to have a whole spectrum of resources.
Yeah.
It's got to be properly funded.
Oh, thanks, Pat. And we'll come back to you in a sec. I might just ask, because I know we have in the audience, we've got, you know, young people, but we've also got family and loved ones as well. And they're keen to know, how can family and loved ones best care for a young person with addiction or mental health issues? So maybe we'll go to Gabriella first, and then maybe Suzie. So what would your advice be? Gabriella, you obviously come into contact with lots of families.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thanks, Sophie. It's very different for each different family situation, but I guess being able to kind of be there as a consistent support for that person, because sometimes they're going to be making choices you don't agree with. And how do you as a family make sure you keep yourself safe and well and healthy so that you can still care for your loved one no matter where they're at? Because sometimes you need to steady the course until they're ready for change. And as long as they know that you're always there to love and support them, and that you'd like to help them to make change when they're ready, it's I think, such a difficult pathway to do, but families need to make sure they stay healthy and well themselves and get some good support. And as Suzie was saying before, it's very, very stigmatising. So often people won't reach out, they won't talk to family, and they won't talk to their friends about it because they don't feel like anybody understands. But there are some great resources out there for families to connect with if their loved one's not yet ready for change. Family Drug Support's a great organisation. They've got a helpline that's available 24 hours a day that's free for families to kind of reach out to and connect with if their loved one's not ready for change. If their loved one is ready for change and asking for help, then families' response can be slightly different, and about activating that, really supporting them to get out there to make referrals. Because like Suzie said, sometimes you'll knock on the door and it's full, and that's really, really challenging when you're ringing services and they're saying, look, I'm really sorry, here's the referral information, but we're not going to have a bed for a number of months. And that can be really deflating. It's like applying for jobs and not getting in. When you're asking for help, having those doors kind of not available to you is really, really difficult. So I think if your loved one is not ready for change, it's about supporting yourself and creating safety and creating boundaries. If they are ready for change, it's about helping them to activate that and helping them to navigate the services.
And Suzie, I'll just go to you on that same question about advice for family and loved ones.
I'd echo what Gabriella's saying. One of the things that NADA does is to support those providing treatment. And so in my experience, both as a clinician and as a provider of training and support to workers who are in this space, we've done a whole lot of work to really ensure that drug and alcohol treatment is inclusive of families and supports, and family in whatever description that is. You know, it might not be biological family, it could be friends or grandparents, it could be special community members. And so it's so important that when we're providing any sort of intervention or treatment, that we think beyond. Absolutely central to that treatment is the young person, but it's about, we know that the thing that helps people, particularly around substance use, is connection. And so one of the key things that all of our treatment services, certainly that our NADA members work on, is supporting the supports. And so I'd echo what Gabriella is saying. One of the key things I would say to any person supporting someone with a substance use issue is to ensure that they're getting support for themselves. Because as Pat was saying, you will have groups of young people who may be experimenting or maybe starting to use alcohol and other drugs in harmful ways, and they may not be in a position where they feel like it's a problem. And in those cases, that's even more important for families, whatever shape or size they are, to reach out for some help and to try very hard, and for us as a community to get better to reduce the stigma so that they can reach out for support when they need it.
And we've had quite a few questions from the audience, and some of them are quite specific, but they're good. And then one of them is, and so we'll stick with you, Suzie, for a second, and maybe ask Pat as well. But how can parents implement, and I think this is something that a lot of parents of teenagers deal with, how can parents implement boundaries around drug use and problematic behaviour when they're dealing with, say, like a 14 to 17-year-old who won't listen to them? What are the sort of ideas that you would have, or the advice you would have?
So that's an extremely good question, Sophie, and I think all of us as parents really often are making it up as we go along. And so I suppose the first thing I would say is get some additional support for yourself. Find out what are some of the things that might be useful, but most importantly, try to keep the communication open with your young person. Boundaries are extremely important. They help young people because all of us go through developmental stages, and part of becoming, being a young person, and the challenge of being young is that that crossroads between being a child but also trying to exert some independence. And so boundaries, just as they were when children are young, are just as important as people develop and grow. And so I think it's very important for parents to be clear about what they can accept and what they can live with. That they do keep safety as a priority, so that they are able to be clear with a child, a young person, about what is acceptable in their space, whilst also maintaining the communication so that if things were to go wrong, that young person still feels they're able to reach out for support. And so in those, so some of the other things that people can consider is whether or not they can try different types of communication. So sometimes directly talking to a young person doesn't always end well, and so it might be that other supports or other community members might be useful to include in a conversation.
So you mean like another adult in the family, or so?
Absolutely.
Sometimes the parent-child dynamic can be challenging, but it may be like another adult,
Exactly.
friendly adult who cares about that young person.
Absolutely, and I suppose it's about being clear too about sometimes parents can feel like there's a bit of they get torn between, do I allow a certain amount of use and then maybe I can change that later, and I think every family is very different and they have to make decisions for themselves. But I suppose the reality is, and we live in a particular society that has laws around particular drugs, and I don't think we can ignore those. And there are consequences, I suppose, that we need to balance as parents as well. But I think most importantly is communicating to that young person that they are a treasured member of the family, that they are loved, and that a family is there for them, but that there are clear boundaries about what's acceptable or not in a particular home, and actually consistency with that messaging is vital. So, a lot of young people are looking for some of those boundaries to hit up against.
Even if they don't think they are or would admit that they want them.
Correct. And I mean, and that's the thing too, is about talking it through. And also trying, I suppose too, and this is just the same for any adult person who might be using alcohol and other drugs, is trying to also understand the role that the substance use plays in that person's life, because as we've heard from a number of the speakers, and this idea of self-medicating is real. And so if there is something that someone is struggling with, the alcohol and drug use may be the one thing that the young person has some control over. And we know that young people often feel quite powerless. So where you can, it's about trying to understand that, but certainly safety is key as well.
Oh, excellent point, Susie. So Pat, I was just going to ask you, this was a question from the audience that I thought you might be able to give us some insight. They've asked, is youth addiction more likely when there are mental health issues, or is it difficult to sort of separate the two and say one's more likely to lead to the other?
Well, I guess we always say it's chicken and egg, and I don't know if Susie would agree with me, but I would love to see like a unification of the approach between mental health and drug and alcohol, because otherwise we're just siloing people, and it kind of works. You see it in primary care. The beauty of primary care is there's no kind of turf. People come into a primary care service like a Headspace or a GP, and they don't partition themselves into drug and alcohol problem over here and mental health problem over here. But if you look at it in terms of the sequential way it works, it could go either way. You might actually start experimenting, in a kind of a risk-taking way, like a lot of young people do, and they might be okay mentally at that point. But then the drug use or the alcohol use takes its own sort of course, and then you get secondary mental health problems as a result of that, because of all the consequences of that. But what I probably see, just because where I work, even in Headspace, more commonly is that the mental health problem will be the thing that drives people into seeking help. They feel bad, you know, they're depressed, or they're in emotional pain, or they're developing psychosis, and they're already self-medicating, probably a very significant percentage of them. But they don't necessarily see the drug and alcohol thing as a problem at that point, but they're willing to get help because they don't feel good. You know, it's the ones that don't really have any distress or emotional pain in the early stages that probably are a bit harder to help and engage, I think. But if there was a holistic, non-judgmental, like Suzie was saying, sort of what's the word? Soft entry point is what we.
Yeah, then it wouldn't really matter which one they had, as long as there was the resources to treat both, like Triple Care Farm does. It's sort of, in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And I saw in the Netherlands where they've kind of adopted our sort of Headspace model, and also in Denmark, and they brand it in different ways in different countries, but they've added value to it in some ways, because they've got a whole bunch of young volunteers, and we have key workers too, who just sort of make it so casual to be able to drop in and talk to someone. And then it's so non-threatening compared to the way we have to book appointments with, you know, clinical looking services that have got big appointment desks as a barrier in front of you when you walk in.
It's a physical barrier as well as another barrier, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Pat, you mentioned peers, and I was going to ask Gabriella about peer pressure and what role that plays, and how should parents deal with the issue of peer pressure? Because, you know, with teenagers in particular, they're not necessarily listening to their parents for guidance, but it's their peers that can, you know, lead them down either a good track or a bad track. So maybe Gabriella and then Suzie, what advice would you have about helping parents deal with peer pressure that might not necessarily be helpful for the young person?
I might just expand on one other idea before I talk about kind of peer pressure. I think what Pat was talking about with peers was peer workers. So in mental health and growing in drug and alcohol is a position where people with lived experience, peers, are a part of the treating team. They're part of the team.
That's a fantastic initiative, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've had a number of peer workers at Triple Care Farm, and the idea of that kind of role is, I've really been there. I know exactly what's happening for you. And I guess that's that positive aspect of the peer relationship, about being able to connect and say, look, you know, I don't have your exact shoes, but I've had some pretty similar ones. Like, I know what that feels like. I know where that's been. And I want to tell you, as Elli said before, things get better. Hang in there, things get better. It kind of really helps young people particularly, and adults as well, across the mental health services and other drug and alcohol services, really be able to connect. And I guess that's that positive peer relationship. Your question was around how do we support parents when they've got negative peer relationships? And I think one of the things that parents need to understand is how important that peer voice is to young people. They really want to be able to connect. They really want to be able to fit in. And so understanding and knowing that it's a massive value for them. And if you want them to step out of a negative peer relationship, that comes at a significant price to the young person. So I think, you know, getting to know your friends, your children's friends, is really key. You know, making opportunities to get to know people so that you can be an influence in those relationships and understand the people within that and the value, and try to create opportunity for change. Try to create opportunities for talking about, is this really working how you want it to work? Is this what you want your friendships to look like? Is that where you want to lead? And trying to kind of understand and connect with that. But I think peers have a massive influence, and that's not something that we're going to change quickly.
Suzie, there's another question from the audience that might be a good one for you, and they're asking, it's really asking about the red flags, I guess, about what's the difference between addiction and then teenagers just sort of experimenting with risky behaviour. What are the red flags that parents and loved ones should look out for to see whether it maybe has shifted from just, you know, starting off trying something to someone, you know, developing an addiction to something? What would your advice be, Suzie?
So I think one of the key things would be that open communication, when you're more likely to see whether there are, you know, obviously we know that for young people it's quite a difficult time, you know, it's a difficult journey, and so things like, you know, mood changes and strong emotions are quite a commonplace, and so sifting through what is problematic and what is just a normal part of development can be quite tricky. So I think sometimes it's about where you can, trying to be present and be part of their lives so that you're able to look out for any particular changes. Sometimes just asking young people where they're at on how things are going. But some of the red flags perhaps might be, perhaps as Pat was saying, you know, there might be already existing issues around anxiety perhaps, and that you know, has an impact for them in terms of their socialising, and therefore when perhaps alcohol and drug use is introduced, it might be a situation in which it escalates quite quickly. So I suppose you'd be looking for things like frequency of use. Certainly if it's experimentation, it's usually pretty sporadic. And whilst there might be a few issues that crop up, so, you know, perhaps someone takes too much of something, or, you know, and they become a bit unwell, certainly that it's about checking in about that. I think it's about being real with young people and saying, oh, you know, you're obviously in not great shape. What's sort of happening around that? I think the other types of red flags are usually they're disconnecting from things that they ordinarily enjoyed. The reality
like sport or something that might have given them a sense of purpose or meaning, and even kept them busy, to be honest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Distracted, actually.
I mean, all boys busy, and that was always something. If I thought if they were busy, that would keep them out of trouble.
To a certain degree. I mean, I think Elli, you know, she was describing, you know, one of the benefits of being at Triple Care was being introduced and engaged in a range of activities. And so we know that for many people, when alcohol and drug use is becoming problematic, it's usually accompanied by a narrowing of both their social interactions, their engagement in things that they love. They're just not getting joy out of the things that they love doing, and that this is sort of a persistent thing. I certainly think that there shouldn't, because I think as parents, and certainly more now, I think, than ever, with, you know, the monitoring that sort of happens via social media, you know, we get lots of, I mean, even as a parent myself, I receive a lot of communication from the school about what my kids are doing day to day. Now, when I went to school, there wasn't that amount of monitoring going on in terms of being directly fed back to my parents. And so I have to wonder too, whether some of the modern things that are going on sometimes exacerbate parents' fears and have them worrying about things, and therefore not also fostering independence. So that is that they might be doing lots of things online that you might not be aware of, and yet you might not be willing to have them go out and spend time on their own or with friends. So I think too, it's as much looking out for red flags, but it's also thinking about what support you might need as a parent, so that you're supporting in ways that are encouraging of the building and the growth of that young person's life as well.
So thank you, Suzie. And another question from the audience, maybe for Pat, and this is something that does come up, so I think it's important to cover, is what do you say to some parents who might think that sort of that tough love approach is better when you're dealing with a young person who's got problems or got, you know, some struggles? What do you say to those parents, Pat, who might think, oh, you know, that tough love, you know, you've got to put, you know, super strict boundaries and there's no wiggle room, and, you know, not coming at it from a sort of more caring approach as we've talked about tonight?
Oh, thanks so much for asking that question. And you can, as I think Suzie was saying, or Gabriella, you can understand why sometimes parents are a bit at their wits' end, you know, especially if it gets pretty tough, you know. But I've been shocked actually to hear that some mental health and other drug and alcohol professionals will advise parents to basically kick their kids out and stuff like that. I mean, that is putting their lives in danger and consigning to homelessness, and I mean, it's unbelievable. And the parents don't want to do that, but professionals have often told them that's what they should do. And I was absolutely shocked by that and give them absolutely the opposite advice. And of course, there's got to be some help for those parents then in dealing with a difficult situation. But I absolutely think that's the worst possible thing you can do. And you have to look behind the behaviour. And teachers have to do this too. You know, most of the kids are not actually, even if what it looks on the surface like bad behaviour or behaviour that's within their control or whatever, you have to look behind behaviour. And that's why I hate that sort of distinction between it's mental health or it's, quote, behavioural, unquote. You know? it's just nonsense. And you have to have empathy for the kid. And I don't think you can work in this field if you don't have that deep identity and empathy with the young person. And that's the gift that the good workers in this field actually have. So the parent would feel that they've got the love for their child, and that's the last thing they would want to do. And there's got to be an alternative to that.
Which, sorry, just to go on from that.
Jump in, Suzie. Yep.
I just feel so strongly, and I totally agree with you. I can totally hold, however, the exasperation and the difficulty for parents. I can hold that, but I 100% agree with you. I think it's really harmful particularly for professionals, to be advising, what is right for a family or not. And I think that it's really important, if you're getting to that point, that's when you have to call in those reinforcements. And usually, it's that you can't do it alone. And really, parenting, doing it on your own, often is difficult for everybody. And so I think it's so important that we try everything that we can to be as compassionate as we can and I'm trying to understand what's going on behind the substance use. What is the role that it plays for that person? And, maintaining that connection. And if you hear some of the volunteers at Family Drug Support, there's some great, amazing stories of just hanging in there. And it's hard. It's really hard. But coming to terms with where someone's at, but sticking there and knowing that they're always there, in whatever way that looks, is incredibly valuable for people turning around or changing their lives.
Someone used sorry, Pat, go.
Oh, it's just quickly, I don't want to hog the conversation here. Just quickly that I think that like the parents of people with addiction, just like the parents of people with mental illness, are so unsupported. So much is left on their shoulders, and it's a really hard thing. I just think that's one of the big failings of our whole system over the last 20 or 30 years, not to have helped the parents more.
Because you're right. If a young person is struggling, then it's not just the young person; it's the family. It's a family issue. It's the family in crisis that they all need the help, not just the young person. And Gabriella, just with some of the families that have come to Triple Care Farm, what are some of the things that the parents say to you once the young person's been through the program? The feedback that you get from parents about the change that they've seen in their young person?
I think you saw in the clip at the beginning some of the hugs and the joy that's returned, but often just that you've saved their life. And my response is they saved their life. We gave them the support, but it's the young person that made the change. I think for lots of families, they had lost hope. And so being able to sort of see their loved one restored, to see them smile. I guess one of my favourite parts of kind of watching young people as they go through the different stages of the program is often young people wear hoodies. And so they'll start off the program and the hood will be up, looking down at the floor. And as they start to kind of get more comfortable, as they start to kind of emerge again, they literally emerge. And you can see them and you can make eye contact and you can smile and you see that young person emerge. And that change happens for the families too, as they stay in contact, as they pre-COVID were able to visit, and but as they're able to kind of talk to their loved one and see that change, they see their son or daughter restored, they see their grandchild, their niece, their nephew, their partner, their mum, their dad, they see that change that's there. And I think I loved what Elli said, every day you conquer, and we get to see young people conquer. I just would love to dearly see there being more places for young people to be able to do that. And I thought it's really important to acknowledge that not every young person needs a program like Triple Care Farm. There's a spectrum of support out there for people. It's really hard to kind of know that, but there's individual counselling, there's family counselling for people that are at that stage, there's day programs, there's online support, there's rehab programs of lots of different types. And not every one of those is going to be the perfect thing for you for that change. It is about matching the program with the person, and sometimes the young person needs to find out what that is too. And I think that's an encouragement for families as well. just because a young person tries once and they don't quite make the change they want to, doesn't mean they can't make the change in the future. It just means they haven't found the right thing yet.
Yeah. And that was something Elli said too, you know, she had been in other programs, but it was the aftercare program for Triple Care Farm that, as well as being at Triple Care Farm, but having that ongoing support to get her life back on track once she'd left was like so crucial to her recovery. And she's just a fantastic example of the great work that you do. So look, our time is up. So I'm going to have to hand back to Helen to thank all our speakers, but thank you all, and I'll hand back to Helen. Thanks very much everyone for their time. Helen?
Thanks so much. Thank you, Sophie, beautifully moderated. I know it's a strange new world that we're in, where all the questions are coming in via the chat. But we recognize that there may be more questions that didn't get answered, so we will send out some support information in an email. And we will also send out some reference links to some of the referral places that the panelists spoke to. Really fantastic discussion. I hope this is the beginning of many discussions. It is absolutely in our strategic direction to open the lid on this social issue and make sure that more people are talking about it, and hopefully we will get in the next 10 years to where mental health has beautifully achieved the destigmatization, where we're all talking about it a lot more easily. So thank you so much, Pat. Thanks, Gab. Thanks, Susie and Sophie again. It's been a wonderful event. Thank you so much, audience, for joining us, and we will be in touch after the event, and hopefully you'll come to many more. Take care. Have a good evening. Bye. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.